In 1958, the poorest man on his street in Wheeling, West Virginia, owned exactly one suit, 2 white shirts, and a single pair of shoes he had resoled himself 3 times. His house was the smallest on the block, and the rent on it was often late. And in nearly 30 years, not one neighbor ever saw him step off his front porch looking like a man who was struggling. He shined, he pressed, he stood straight. Strangers took him for a foreman, a deacon, a man of some means, and he was none of those things. He was broke and proud, and he had a code. Most of that code is gone now, buried with the men who lived it. And the one rule beneath all the rest, the one that was never really about clothes at all, is number 1. He was not unusual. In the mill towns and coal patches and back streets of that America, there was a man like him on every block, a man with empty pockets who would sooner go hungry than go shabby, who understood that when you have nothing else, how you carry yourself is the one thing no one can take from you. It was not vanity. It was armor. They wore it against a world that reads a man's worth off his shoes, and it let them walk into any room with their heads level. Then we grew comfortable, and we decided that dressing with care was pretense, that looking put together was trying too hard, that comfort mattered more than dignity. We traded the poor man who refused to look poor for a comfortable one who looks defeated, and we called it freedom. Number 22, he did every morning of his life, rain or shine, working or laid off, and it cost him nothing but 5 minutes. Number 11 is the reason no one on that street ever knew how close to the edge he lived. And number 1, the single habit beneath his whole code, the reason a broke man from the smallest house on the block commanded more respect than the bankers he passed on the sidewalk, took no money at all, and almost no one does it anymore. Stay with him to the end. This was not fashion, and it was not pride in the sinful sense. It was self-respect made visible, a man insisting, with a pressed collar and a straight back, that being poor was not the same as being less. That is the difference between a man the world pities and a man the world respects, whatever is in his wallet. Every rule on this list, that Wheeling man lived by heart, in a house where money was always short and dignity never was. Hit that subscribe button and let us count down the dignity code, the rules 1950s men lived by so they never once left home looking poor. Number 25. He shined his shoes every single night. Before bed, at the kitchen table, he worked polish into both shoes until they held a light, every night, whether he'd worn them to church or to the unemployment office. You do the same. A rag, a tin of polish, 5 minutes, and you never let a scuffed toe walk out your door. A porter in Chicago in 1956 could read a man's whole story off his shoes and said most men failed the test. The Wheeling man knew people judge a poor man by his shoes first, and a shined shoe on a worn suit says cared for, not given up. Polish was cheaper than pride. He never once left the house failing that test. Number 24. He pressed a crease nobody was paying to see. He set a sharp crease in his trousers for a trip to the hardware store because the care was for himself, not the audience. You keep an iron hot and never let a wrinkle tell the world you've stopped trying. A tailor in Cincinnati in 1957 said you could spot a man's self-respect at 50 feet by the line of his trousers. The Wheeling man pressed his one suit on the kitchen table by hand because a sharp crease cost nothing but effort and effort was the one currency he always had. The wrinkle was free, so was the crease. He chose the crease every time. Number 23, he owned one good suit and treated it like armor. He had a single suit, and he kept it brushed, pressed, and hung with a care that bordered on reverence. You do not need a closet full, you need one that fits, kept immaculate, ready for a church, a funeral, a job, or a fight. A steelworker in Gary, Indiana in 1958 wore the same blue suit for 15 years and looked sharp in it every time. The wheeling man's suit was old, and everyone knew it, and it never once looked poor, because a well-kept old suit outranks a neglected new one in every room that matters. The suit was armor. He never left the house without it on straight. Number 22. He never left the house unshaven. Every morning, working or not, he shaved clean at the same cracked mirror. 5 minutes, rain or shine, laid off or flush. You keep a sharp razor and never let stubble tell the street you have quit on the day. A barber in Birmingham in 1955 said a clean shave was the cheapest respect a poor man could buy. For the wheeling man, this was daily and unbroken through the good years and the long bad winter, because a shaved face said a man still had his hands on his own life. This is number 22, and it cost him nothing but 5 minutes he was never too beaten to spend. Number 21. A white shirt, however old, was always clean. His shirts were worn thin at the collar, but they were bleached bright and pressed stiff every time. You do not need new, you need clean, and clean is available to the poorest man alive. A schoolteacher in Memphis in 1954 said she could always tell the proud poor children by their collars. The wheeling man's wife scrubbed those collars by hand because a clean white shirt on a poor man is a flag that says the poverty is in the wallet, not the character. New was out of reach. Clean never was. He wore clean like a badge. Number 20. He mended what he could not replace. A loose button, a fraying hem, a split seam. He fixed it that same night, so the wear never showed. You keep a needle and thread, and never let a small tear become a shabby man. A cobbler in Providence in 1956 kept half the town's shoes alive, years past their time. The wheeling man patched, darned, and resoled rather than let anything go ragged, because a mended thing cared for reads as thrift, and a torn thing ignored reads as defeat. He could not always buy new. He could always keep the old from looking poor. He never missed the difference.
Before we go on, I made something special for you. A guide for men like us who still believe a good name and good manners mean something. It's the lost gentleman's code, the old-fashioned manners American gentlemen once lived by, the kind that make you the man everyone respects, welcome in any room you walk into. But these ways are disappearing fast, and once they're gone for good. I've put together 2 books for you, plus a free bonus. Don't spend another year being the man people overlook. Scan the QR code on screen or click the link below. Go ahead, I'll wait.
Number 19. He kept his hat brushed and set straight. His hat was brushed clean of dust and set square on his head, never battered, never crooked. You care for the hat the way you care for the shoes. The 2 ends of a man tell the whole story. A newspaper man in Kansas City in 1957 said you could read a man's mourning in the angle of his hat. The wheeling man's hat was old felt, brushed and blocked and worn level, because a hat worn with care crowns a man and a hat worn careless just covers one. The felt was cheap. The bearing under it was not. Number 18. His hands were a working man's, but they were clean. His hands were rough and scarred from labor, and the nails were always trimmed and the grime always scrubbed out. You do not hide honest work, you just never carry the dirt of it into the rest of your life. A machinist in Detroit in 1958 scrubbed his hands raw every evening before he'd touch his own front door. The wheeling man wore his calluses with no shame and his dirt with plenty, because clean hands on a laboring man say, "I work hard and I respect where I'm going." The calluses were earned. The cleanliness was chosen. "Here is the trade we made," said plainly. Every rule in this code asks the same thing of a man, that he spend effort every day on how he meets the world for no reward but his own self-respect. That is work, and it is pride in the good and ancient sense. And we have spent decades deciding that pride was vanity, that care was superficial, that a man who bothered to shine his shoes was putting on airs. We got rich enough to stop trying, and we called the stopping comfort and authenticity. We let ourselves leave the house looking like we had surrendered and told ourselves it was freedom. But the poor man in his pressed shirt was never free of anything. He was armored against a world that would have written him off, and the armor worked. We had more than he ever dreamed of, and we walked out the door looking like less. Number 17. He never skipped the haircut. His hair was cut neat and kept neat, trimmed at the barber when there was money and trimmed at home when there was not. You never let your hair grow shaggy and tell the world you have let things slide. A father in Toledo in 1956 cut all 4 of his sons' hair on the back porch every second Sunday. The wheeling man kept a comb in his pocket and a straight part in his hair, because a neat head is a nickel's worth of dignity any man can afford. The barber was a luxury. Neat was not. He was always neat. Number 16. He was never caught half-dressed in public. Shirt buttoned, collar done, tie up, sleeves down. He did not step outside a man half-assembled. You finish dressing before you open the door. You are not put together in pieces. A bank clerk in Richmond in 1955 would not walk to the corner without his tie squared. The wheeling man buttoned all the way up, even in the summer heat, because a man fully dressed looks like a man in command of himself, and a man half-dressed looks like a man losing the thread. It took no money to be complete. It only took the care, and he always took the care. Number 15. He changed out of his work clothes to go anywhere. Off the job, the coveralls came off, and the good clothes went on. He would not run an errand in the uniform of his labor. You keep the work clothes for work, and meet the rest of the world as more than your job. A railroad man in Omaha in 1957 washed and changed before he would walk into a single store. The wheeling man had a rule that the mill stayed at the mill, because a man is not only what he does for money, and how he dressed off the clock said so. The coveralls were for work. The man was for the world. Number 14. The small details matched. Belt to shoes, socks to trousers, the tie knotted right. The little things lined up, because the little things are where care shows. You mind the details no one is grading, because the man himself knows, and it shows in how he carries them. A haberdasher in New Orleans in 1956 said the details are where a cheap man and a careful one part ways. The wheeling man had almost nothing, and what he had matched, because coordination costs nothing but attention, and attention was free. The pieces were plain. That they agreed was the dignity. Number 13, his one suit fit because he made it fit. A hand-me-down jacket went to his wife's needle until it sat right on his shoulders, because a suit that fits a poor man beats a fine one that hangs on a rich one. You take in, let out, and hem until the cloth fits the man, because fit is what the eye reads as quality. A seamstress in Baltimore in 1958 could make a thrift store jacket look bespoke. The wheeling man's wife altered every stitch he owned because fit was the one luxury that cost only labor. The cloth was cheap. The FIE made it look like it wasn't. Number 12. He kept his troubles off his face. However bad the week, he did not carry worry, bitterness, or self-pity out onto the street for the neighbors to read. You leave the fear at the kitchen table and meet the world with a level, easy face. A father in Cleveland in 1957 lost his job and no one on his block knew for 2 months. The wheeling man wore an even expression through the worst of it because a poor man who looks worried looks defeated, and a poor man who looks calm looks like a man with a plan. The trouble was real. He just refused to wear it, and that refusal was armor too. Number 11. He paid his own way. He would go without before he would take visible charity, and he paid his small debts before he fed a want of his own. You carry your own weight where people can see it, and never let yourself become the man others quietly pity. A grocer in Scranton in 1955 extended credit to proud men who paid back every cent the moment they could. The wheeling man's pride would not let him take a handout on the street, though he gave plenty in private, because a man who pays his own way keeps something that charity can quietly cost. This is number 11, and it is why no one on that street ever knew how close to the edge he lived. Number 10. He kept his word and paid his debts on time. A poor man's credit is his name, and he guarded his name like the only capital he had, because it was. You pay when you say you'll pay, do what you say you'll do, and never let your word be worth less than a rich man's check. A shopkeeper in Nashville in 1956 said he'd lend to certain poor men over any wealthy one, on their word alone. The wheeling man was one of those men in his town because a reputation for keeping your word is wealth that no bad year can foreclose on. The bank account was thin. The name was solid gold. Number 9. He was never late. He arrived on time or early to everything, work, church, a neighbor's door, because punctuality was respect he could always afford to pay. You treat another man's time as more valuable than your own, and you are never the one who keeps people waiting. A foreman in Pittsburgh in 1958 said the poor men who showed up early were the ones he promoted first. The wheeling man was early to every shift and every appointment for 30 years, because being on time told the world he took it, and himself, seriously. Money he did not have. Punctuality he could give away by the hour. Here is the part of his story we skipped. In the winter of 1959, the mill cut its rolls, and the wheeling man was out of work for the better part of a year in a valley where 1,000 other men were chasing the same few jobs. There was a stretch of weeks when there was almost nothing in the house. And here is what the neighbors remembered, long after they learned how bad it had been. Every single morning of that year, he rose in the dark, shaved at the cracked mirror, put on the pressed shirt and the shined shoes and the one good suit, and walked out the door looking exactly like a man on his way to a job. He was not. He was walking to the hiring lines and the back doors and the nose, and he did it dressed like a man who mattered, because he understood what the desperate forget. that the day you let the world see you beaten is the day the world starts believing it, and so do you. His own children did not know they were poor that winter. They found out as grown adults and could not believe it, because their father had never once let it show. That was the whole code, worn at its very hardest. And the rule underneath all of it is still coming. It is number 1. Number 8. He kept his home and his yard tidy. The house was small and old, but the porch was swept, the walk was clear, and the little patch of yard was trimmed. You keep the outside of your home in order because it is the face your family shows the street. A widow's son in Louisville in 1957 kept the poorest house on the block looking cared for, and it commanded respect. The wheeling man could not afford a bigger house, so he made the small one immaculate, because a tidy, poor home says proud, and a neglected one says given up, and the difference is only effort. The house stayed small, it never once looked poor. Number 7. He sent his children out, looking cared for. His kids wore hand-me-downs and mended clothes, but they went to school scrubbed, combed, pressed, and shod. You do for the children first, their clothes clean, their shoes whole, their hair neat, because the world judges them by it the way it judges you. A mother in Des Moines in 1956 patched and pressed her children's clothes past midnight so they would never be the ragged ones. The wheeling man made sure his children never wore their poverty to school, because a child who looks cared for is treated as cared for, and a child never learns a shame he is never dressed in. The clothes were old. The care in them was new every morning. Number 6. He spoke clean and plain. He did not curse in front of women or children or strangers, and he spoke in a measured, level voice that carried its own authority. You mind your tongue in public, because how a man speaks is worn as plainly as what he wears. A deacon in Charleston in 1955 could quiet a room with a low, clean sentence. The wheeling man's speech was simple and never coarse, because clean speech costs nothing and lends a poor man a dignity no fine clothes can buy alone. The vocabulary was plain. The self-command in it was the point. Number 5. He was generous with what little he had. He tipped when he could barely afford to eat, gave to the collection plate, and never let a guest leave his home without something. You refuse to let poverty make you small, because the man who clutches every penny is poorer than his bank account. A porter in Atlanta in 1957 tipped the shoeshine boy out of tips of his own. The wheeling man gave out of his little because generosity was a dignity that had nothing to do with money, and a poor man who gives has something no miser ever will. The purse was thin. The spirit refused to be. Number 4. He took hard, humble work without shame. He swept floors, hauled coal, and did the jobs prouder men thought beneath them, and he did them with his head up. You never let the lowliness of honest work bend your back or your self-regard. A janitor in Milwaukee in 1958 kept a school spotless for 30 years, and every teacher there called him Sir. The wheeling man believed no honest labor could shame a man, and only idleness could. So he took whatever work there was and dignified it by how he did it. The job was humble. The man doing it never was. Number 3. He looked every man in the eye. Rich or poor, boss or beggar, he met every person's gaze straight on, level and unhurried, and never dropped his eyes for anyone. You hold a man's eyes not in challenge but in equality, because a lowered gaze tells the world you have agreed you are less. A dock worker in Norfolk in 1956 looked the company owner in the eye the same as he looked the deckhands. The wheeling man never once studied his shoes, while a wealthier man spoke to him because he had decided, long before, that no man's money made him taller. That was his rule, every day, the level eyes of a man who owed no one an apology for being poor. Number 2, he never let anyone see him grovel. He would ask plainly for work or for a fair price, but he would not fawn, flatter, or beg. Not to the landlord, not to the foreman, not to any man who held something over him. You keep your spine in the very rooms that most tempt you to bend it, because dignity surrendered to get something is dignity you rarely get back. A tenant in Birmingham in 1955 gave up a house rather than beg a landlord who wanted to watch him do it. The wheeling man asked for what he needed as one man to another, never as a lesser to a greater, because a poor man who will not grovel keeps the one thing poverty most wants to take. He went without, sometimes. He never went small. Number 1, he stood like a man who had somewhere to be. That is the whole of it. Shoulders back, chin level, an unhurried and certain step, he carried himself on the poorest day of his life, like a man the world had better take seriously. This is the thread that has run under every minute of this list since the first. Because here is the secret the whole code was hiding. It was never about the shoes, or the crease, or the clean collar. Those were only the outward signs of the one decision beneath them all, that being broke was not the same as being beaten, and he would not wear defeat where anyone could see it, least of all himself. The shine, the press, the level eyes, the straight back, 24 ways of saying the same thing. I am poor, and I am not less. A man's posture is the one suit he can never take off, and he wore his like it had been tailored. When his children were grown and told they had been raised poor, they did not believe it, because they had never once seen their father stand like a poor man. That is the rule almost no one keeps now, in an age with closets full of clothes and nothing worn with pride. It costs nothing. It asks only that you decide every morning that whatever you lack, you will not carry yourself like a man who has given up. He decided it every day of his life, and he walked out of the smallest house on the street like he owned the whole block. None of these rules of the Dignity Code required money, and that was the entire point. They required only a man who had decided that poverty could empty his pockets but would not be allowed to touch his self-respect, and who was willing to spend a little effort every single morning proving it. The men who lived this way are mostly gone now, and we, who have so much more than they ever did, leave the house looking like we have stopped caring and wonder why we feel so small. We mistook their dignity for vanity and threw it out and lost the self-respect that was sewn into it. But the code was never expensive and never complicated. It waits in every person willing to shine the shoes, press the shirt, keep the word, hold the eyes, and stand up straight on the worst day of their life, waiting for anyone who understands that looking poor and being poor were never the same thing, and that the difference, then as now, is only dignity, and dignity was always free.